The Magus tries to plead with the Queen of Atolia to take him on as Queen's Thief. That's apparently a role in this world, is you have the King and Queen's Thief. And the Queen of Atolia is like, you're going to be mine. And he's like, over my dead body. And he's also kind of like being a bit of a baby at this point. Like, he's like, me.
No. This is an important part of Will lore, okay?
Okay.
Oh.
The Queen of Atolia is hot, and she's...
Oh my God, I knew
Oh,
you
God.
were going to say it.
As a wee boy, I was like, I didn't fully understand it. I was like, she's really interesting. I'd like to read more about her. Like, she's my favorite part of this book. I don't know what it is.
I fully believe that. Seminal moment. Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast, Unresolved Textual Tension. Today, it is me, your host, Maria, and with me, my handsome bitches, William and Katie.
Okay, and what book are we doing today, Katie?
We are doing The Thief by, I actually don't remember his name.
Megan Whalen
Megan?
Turner.
Yeah.
Oh, is it a woman? Yeah.
I
It
told you
is.
Yeah.
See,
So,
this is actually one of the very few books that I own.
and it is part of the Queen's Thief series?
Yes. We'll give a little bit of an impression first of what we all thought, and then we'll jump into the premise. Okay, Maria, and this is also a book club book, so our patrons had things to say about it. Join our Patreon. Maria, what were your opinions?
I don't think this is a bad book, but it was insanely boring until the last fourth, where it suddenly decided to develop a fucking pace, and then it decided to pull one of the dumbest
Wasn't
plot. And the thing was, it was so obvious, but it just. I'm gonna make an argument for how to make this book work by just making it in third fucking person and adding shit to happen in the first 3/4 of the book, because it's not a bad book. And at the end, I thought I'd maybe read the second one, and I was so angry by that response, because like if you could do stuff that interesting in the last fourth, why the fuck was I bored out of my mind for the first 2/3? Again, not a bad book, but I'm angry, guys. This book made me angry. That's me.
Katie, why don't you say what your opinion was before I say what mine is? Because I read this as a child, so mine's going to be the definitive opinion.
Oh, yeah, sure. No, Maria and I actually talked about it the other day prior to both of us finishing it. I think we were in the same area, too, of the book. And I was like, okay, one of two things are going to happen. And if one of them happens, and then she interrupted me at the time, and she was like, then why wasn't it in third person? And I'm like, yes, I am aware. Which I feel kind of convoluted about, because we'll get into it, I suppose. But I feel like I don't know, it's a weird choice to do first person for the big reveal. And that's what this book really, like, hinges on. It's just one really big reveal. And it's not really a reveal because there's so many things that are just like, oh, well, then this is happening because it's all the clues come together to this one thing. And like Maria said, it's well written. It's really well written, and it's so clean, and like it progresses so naturally as far as just like the way the language flows into each of the scenes and into the next thing. But nothing happens. It's just riding horses.
And food, and talking about, do we have food? Is there enough food? Can I have some more food? Please, sir, can I have some more? Over.
Yeah, so it's just like, it's kind of weird, the choice made for what was focused on for the first 3/4 of the book. I don't know why she did it. I'm confused, and that's me.
So it's time for my opinion, the definitive opinion. I read this as a child, and as a child, I really liked it. And so going back to it, I heard everybody saying like, "Oh, this is not good. It's boring." And I was like, "Okay, was Child Will wrong?" Because Child Will so far has been batting 100. Sabriel, just as good as I remember. Another book, not as good as I remember. So I was like, "Okay, Crisis of Faith." And I read this book today or yesterday in a one sitting, and I really liked it. And I know this will shock many of you, because I am the voice of criticism on this podcast. Often when I am not here, people in the comments are like, "Oh, I wish Will had been here to tear this book apart." And, I embrace that role gladly, but I quite liked this book. Now, I don't actually think I do not blame people for finding it boring. I get that. It is boring. It is a really well written travel montage.
God, yeah.
But the thing
Yep.
is that there's no underlying tension or structure to it, really. And so I could see where for other people it would be very boring, but for me, I liked the slice of life style of it, of the character interactions and like how that kind of was building up and changing over time. And the thing is, for me, I read it at two speed, so it was like it was just a pleasant way to spend like 3 or 4 hours. And so before you guys can respond with vitriol, Maria, what's the premise of this book?
So the premise of this book is a fetch quest. That's the premise of this book. And as Will has said, it is a travelogue. And basically, you have a cast of characters that depart a kingdom of Sunis. Amongst this host of characters, there is a thief who has been in the king's prison for the past year, who is our main narrator. His name is Jen, and he is our first person narrator. He is taken out of the king's prison, and he goes with the king's magus, who he don't like, and then these two guys who he doesn't really know but are the magus's apprentice, and this like soldier dude named Pole. And they basically go through a like forest, and they travel.
They literally
and
just
they talk.
travel without danger or action
Yes.
for the first half of this book.
For the first
And
2/4 of this book, or no, 3/4 of this book, they just travel without danger, and you're building up like tiny little character interactions until they get to the fetch quest, they get the MacGuffin, and then they take it back to the place where they're going, and then they go, and the lady's like, I'm gonna destroy the MacGuffin. Who needs this MacGuffin? Why did we do any of this? That's the plot.
Maria had feelings on this. And I cannot disagree. So usually when we do bad books, often I'll say like, this is a fine book, but I'm going to spend all my time criticizing it. Like I've said that about certain books. And in this one, I'm going to spend all my time talking about things I liked about it, but it is deeply flawed in its structure. And like it only works because Megan Whalen Turner is able to really turn up the
You can't.
the
no.
Whalen moment. She's able to turn up the little grace notes of why she's such a good writer. It only really works as far as it does because she's so talented.
And I'm gonna say that I do think this is a fine book. I think this is I'm mainly gonna talk about the things I didn't like. I will talk about the stuff I did like because I do think there are things here to like. And I know a couple of people who have read the entire series have said it definitely gets better as it goes, and that Will mentioned that this is this book versus the second one is like tonal whiplash as far as
What?
the feel of it. Well, yeah, because apparently the rest of the books are in third fucking person. Like this
Why?
one.
Why?
It's
I
not
don't-
even that. It's a totally different kind of story.
Yeah, this is almost like a. Then this kind of reads. I wonder if this is. This almost makes me feel like this is a one of those side stories in the middle of a TV show where it shows you a little glimpse into the past, and it's like really low key, and there's like no stakes because you don't really care about the plot because you're in the current plot, and it just tells you a little bit about the characters and like what happened
this
before.
would be a C plot in a
Yes.
fantasy television show. This would be like there'd be a bunch of other political stuff happening, and then every once in a while we'd pop back to the group that had to go get the MacGuffin.
I wonder why she chose to do first person because, like, again, I haven't argued. Like, I know you don't
Maria's
like it.
so frustrated.
Man.
I know you don't like it, Maria, but like, I like it kind of, but it also seems useless. Like, I don't understand. She obviously. I have very, very mixed feelings about the structure of this story because it's such great goddamn writing that it works as far as like it's a pleasurable read and it's kind of like fun in some places. And also you're rooting for the main character a lot, and there's so many details he picks up and so much knowledge he has that it's like he's obviously not this low like, you know, thief from a gutter place that everybody seems to think he is, but it's like it's almost like everybody is too much of themselves. You know what I mean? Like everybody has like they are too infused with so many impressive or like attributes that make them very competent in ways, and it's just like, I don't know, I can't even formulate my thoughts. That's how frustrated I am. It's because I don't really
I'll see if some of the stuff I say addresses your stuff, but like I do agree. So one of my biggest problems is that I was the entire time like I'd really like for because like I found Jen a little annoying because I saw the conceit of the book from the start. I was like, okay, this isn't like a common gutter thief. Like, and why are you hiding this from us? Like,
that's what I'm saying.
The tension would have been so much better to know that he was actually working on a different thing, and then to see him get close to these people and know eventually he'd have to betray them and do this thing. I think that would have been like, if you were gonna do it in first person, I think that would have been a better way to do it, or do it in third person. And the other problem is because we're in first person and we're in his head, and he's also trying to, because the conceit of this book is this is Eugenides' retelling that he wrote of his experience on this adventure. So he did a little haha and he hid it from the reader, which also doesn't make sense because he wrote it for the queen after he already told her the whole thing. So it just...
This is what I'm getting at, though. It feels so convoluted, the logic behind the choice of how it's written. And the whole time you know that he's pretending to be somebody he's not. So it's not a surprise when it happens. And so it's while it's kind of fulfilling and satisfying to get to that point in the novel where like everything is revealed and everything, it's also simultaneously kind of like a soft punch. It doesn't like really hit the way I would have perhaps preferred to make it really feel visceral in my chest when I got to that point. Yeah. And it just also, there was just, as I was going through it the whole time, he knows so much stuff, and that he shouldn't know if he is what he is pretending to be he is. And so the whole time you're like, yes, I know who he is. Yes, I know who he is. Yes, I know who he is. And then so when it finally comes, you're just like, okay, yeah, I knew that.
And it just makes it like, why were you trying so hard to hide it? Like, why did this... It's like in Savior's Champion where Moressi's like, surprise, Layla was the savior the whole time. Bet you didn't know that. And you're like, why didn't you just engage with it? Like, it was there. You could have engaged with it, added some tension, given it a little oomph. Like, there's so many ways to handle, like, this situation that I think could have worked better within the structure of it, and it would have added tension. Like, knowing, like, imagine you have to travel with a bunch of people, you get to know them, and the entire time you know you are going to betray them, and maybe you're getting to know them, and the tension of having to hide yourself, make sure you not slip up. That would be so much more tension given to the reader, and also to know that like, he's working on a grander plot than, oh, golly gee whiz, I hope the King of Soonest doesn't throw me back in prison. And again, I don't think this is a bad book. It is, as Katie said, as Willow said, it's really well written. And I'm actually surprised as someone who quite likes, like, slice of life, like, slow stuff.
I liked it. I liked it. It was, well, the thing that kind of sucked is that I kind of felt like she was edging me the whole time. You know? Like, it's edging, but without, like, the final... release. Yes, exactly. And that's the problem. So I kind of felt like I was blue balled. Yeah, I like that.
For me, the problem was I like slice of life, and I've talked about this before. If you're going to do slice of life, I need person to person tension.
Oh yeah, we did talk about that.
Unfortunately, I did not find the person to person tension in this at all compelling, because for the first half of the book, the characters feel very one note. It is only towards the end that we start bonding more. Like, and the thing is, I don't like the bond. I wish that we would have bonded with the Magus earlier and in some more interesting ways. And I wish there would have been a little bit more nuance in the first half, because I liked the Magus the whole time. I was like,
Me too.
I fucks with this guy. This guy's super fucking smart. He's a gentleman and a scholar. And I like his, like, and I like that he's like, and I also wish we would have found out that his motivation of, no, we just need to, the king needs to marry this lady because we need an allyship because there's these other people that are coming. That's stakes. That's not just, oh, we hate Atolia because they tried to invade us before, so we're going to invade. Oh, no, we need to unite and get this whole region united.
Yeah,
so
that's pretty intense.
Other group, I think that's so great. That is such a nice thing, and it gives the Magus such good motivations where you realize this is a man who is not just bound by a sense of loyalty, to a king, but to his country, to
he's
his
patriot.
people, to
he's
the
a patriot
culture.
for his country.
And also that information makes it where when you get to the end, you're like, yeah, I see why he wouldn't be mad at Eugenides. He'd be like, yeah, that, like, go, my dude, you did your thing. And unfortunately, we're denied that for so much of the book, and it's just, there's so much that is just travel montage without the nice interpersonal, like, I would have liked Ambiades to feel, because like he just felt for most of the book like
oh my
a jealous
god, school bully.
jealous school bully who wasn't below his station. And I'm like, I would have liked to think he was smart and that maybe he was doing a coup, you know. I didn't, there was no, like, I did, at no point was I like, ah, yes, that's what's, I don't know.
You're correct about all of that. The structure of why something like Maria said, like slice of life works if there's a lot of interpersonal drama and if there is sort of an underlying tension that can help a lot. And a lot of the more interesting ideas are introduced in the back half of the book and nothing's really done with them. And so one thing I think one of our patrons had said is that, you know, she'd written, Megan Whalen Turner had not written a lot of Whalen books before this. She'd mostly written short stories. And so that this kind of feels a lot like a short story that got expanded into novel length. But basically just in the middle, somebody dropped a lot of travel montage. Because in a short story, the twist is actually a little clever. You're like, oh, cool. All right. Next, like, that's interesting. And this is something where the form of it is not complementing the content of it. And so, yeah, again, this is a book that, like, I found very pleasant to listen to, but
Yeah.
lots and lots of issues. Before we talk more about it, though, we have two things we need to bring up. One, Katie, when I said, but I was reading in some of our Discord thoughts, how did people know we were going to be reading this book on our Discord? Why do we have a Discord? What is up with all of that?
We have a Discord because we have a Patreon. And, well, I don't know if that cause and effect really goes together, but yeah, I think that works. Yeah. I like Maria's, like, cheer.
We didn't
keep going.
When we
That's
launched
exactly
the
it.
Patreon, we didn't even have the Discord originally, and then people were like, "You should have a Discord," and I was like,
Okay, yeah,
"Fine."
then solid. That's the birth chicken and egg. So
Yes.
anyway, we have a Patreon that you can join, and we have a Discord that has a very robust community. And this was a book club choice. Who nominated it?
No one. I decided to read it.
So you just took control of the whole damn thing.
No.
and just-
We have our-
Democracy
we
is
have
a
our-
flawed
No.
creation.
Our mid-month book
They're
is
not
always
sending-
something that Will chooses. Our end
They're
of
not
month is what
sending their
everyone
best.
chooses.
Um,
Yes, so this was a mid one. It actually was nominated, I think, by Angry Otter, and that reminded me that it existed. And I was like, nostalgia reads, because this video will get no views. If you've hung in this long, you are probably already a patron. If not, hit the like button and leave a comment. It can be pretty short. Both of those very much help the channel if you don't have the cash money to support independent journalism like us. And then also we have Above the Book Club. Me and Katie do once a month a critique stream. It's tomorrow. I always know what we're going to look at beforehand and never have to make it up on the spot.
Never.
And then also Katie once a week has been doing KFC, where that is Katie's Fiction Corner, where she talks with the patrons and looks at their writing a little bit. And you are not guaranteed a spot for your writing in there by joining that tier. You just gain access to them. And that's our Parasocial Darling tier. That includes both. So, Maria, what? We already talked about the premise. So where does this book start? Who is this Magus we keep speaking of?
So this book starts in the king's prison in the kingdom of Sunis. One thing I will give flowers for to this author: cool world building, real cool. We're dealing with, like, you think it's gonna be sword and sandal, but it's like she took sword and sandal Greek / Roman vibes with medieval plus guns. It's a real nice mix, and she unveils it slowly. Like, you don't know there's guns at first, and so it's this real nice, like, understanding of the world. She does it very subtly. It works really well. The way she reworked Greek myths into the mythology of this, really fantastic. You get a vibe that there's a Greece country and there's a Turkey country because Anatolia,
yeah.
Clever.
So we start in the king's prison, and who should be there but our main point of view character, Jen. He's been in prison for a while because he
Is it
blurted out. He basically in a wine shop said he could steal the king's seal did so, went back to the wine shop and went, look, I did it, and then got arrested. And you're like, wow, what a dumb thing to do for a really successful thief to do. I wonder.
Immediately, already, as we're getting his characterization, you're like, okay, why did he do this? There's ulterior motives here.
And he gets taken out of prison one day, and he's taken before the king's magus, who never gets a name. Zero name. We never learn his name.
He is the magus.
I wish we got his name at some point, but similarly, the queen was only ever called the queen. She never got a name. I don't know. But anyway, the magus is the king's advisor. Used to be a magic position, but now it's just for like a real smart scholarly dude. And he's like, I need your help, you filthy gutter rat. We are going to go steal something, and I need you to come with us to be the thiefer person. And he's like, I'm so weak because I've been in prison for so long. I can't stand and have to dirty your really nice
Oh my God.
chair.
Okay. So I didn't know if I was allowed to mention that detail, but oh my God, that was such a cute interaction. There's the whole little part he gets, brought up to the Magus's office, and there's a plush, comfortable chair, and Jen sits down in it, and he's filthy, like he's been in prison. And the Magus is like, get up. And then he just like ignores him because he's so exhausted, as Maria said. And then he's like, the Magus, I might need to burn that chair afterwards or have it thoroughly cleaned. And then this comes up again later, which is a very little clever twist of situation.
Ooh, Shay says, because Science Fantastic asked if this was meant for kids, and Shay said, I read this to my then 10-year-old and he loved it and the twist. Yeah, he has a lot of fun with it. So, yeah, I that's another thing I should say is this is definitely
safe.
Middle grade.
Yeah, no, well, there's a lot of safety in this novel. Like, there's nothing too crazy, and when it does get crazy towards the end, it's kind of like that's the exciting part. So there's nothing too scary about the exploration of this novel.
The relationships are very kind of fun or not fun per se, but like they are very concrete. And again, as a kid, I really enjoyed listening to I really enjoyed reading it. I liked it quite a lot. I also liked that Jen is kind of like a smaller dude, and as a kind of smaller dude as a kid, I really liked that.
I liked it. I like that it got brought up. I like that he's still like super competent. We don't get enough like short king representation in positive ways. I love it. But yeah, so there's that interaction, and then they throw him back in prison, and Jen's like, man, I forgot to ask when we'd be going on this journey or how long it is. And then they come back, and they're like, next day, we're going on the journey, Jen. And they take him, they throw him on a horse. He's like, I don't like horses, I don't do horses. And they throw him on, and then they start going, and thus starts the cycle of Jen being like, I'm hungry, I'm tired, can we take a break? I'm hungry. I'm tired. Can we take a break?
That did get really, really...
Old, really?
That is the one thing that I would say is I just really wish there was a little bit of less of that. I don't know if it was there because of like... Oh, yeah. Well, it looks like you wanted to say something.
I love Jen as a character. He is so whiny and so like kind of annoyed with the world, and like he really thinks he's hot shit and he ain't, and it's so funny to read to me. A lot of people said they had trouble identifying this character, and I do get that, but to me it's so funny how like he thinks he's hot shit and he isn't. he whines a lot.
Yeah, well, I didn't think it was... I thought he was very likable, though. It's because he's a nice person. That's the thing, is that he has a kindness to him the whole time, and that kindness shines through a lot of his more irritating qualities, that, like, as a reader or a listener, you're like, okay, I really wish something new would happen as far as his dialogue went, but he's always really kind and thoughtful, and you know that he's machinating in the background of everything. It's because of the way it's written, the little clues you get, so it's very, like, he seems like a very, like, or he is a very satisfying character to follow.
So I suppose this was my contrarian kicking in, because I knew the author was hiding shit. Yeah. And I knew that the whining was partially an act. And that I just wanted to punch him so
Yeah.
much. Like, I don't
A
think Jen
little.
is a bad character, and there's points at which I find him very compelling. But especially in this first half, I just wanted to punch him in his smug face because the vibe I got was, you know exactly what the fuck you're doing. And the author is trying to, like, the author, while leaving clues, wants you to believe that Jen is just a whiny degenerate who thinks he's hot shit but isn't. And I'm like, no, this guy obviously is hot shit. Like, he obviously in
Yes.
this situation isn't, but he obviously is. So I was just, the contrarian in me was so angry.
It kind of seems pandered.
I think it's something where maybe because a lot of people also talked about that, but to me, I always had the impression that like, no, he's not actually that hot shit. Like, I always got the impression that like he is kind of this one, like that is authentically who he is. He may put it on a little bit, but he is very butthurt about everyone thinking he's not a good thief when he is one, and like his that sullenness to him, I always kind of read as like, yeah, that's genuinely who he is. But you may be correct, because that is one of the reasons that when I read the second book, because I did read the second one, I was like, I don't like this character that much as in the first one.
Yeah, because he's not. It's a fucking act. I call it from a mile away.
You know what I did
Well-
like, though? I really enjoyed, I think one thing that was super, in this scenario that we're discussing where he's actually hot shit pretending he's not hot shit, I really enjoyed that throughout the entire story when we're traveling. He doesn't steal anything. I put that in air quotes, by the way, everyone who's not watching this. Towards the end, it's like there's several scenes where like he lists the things that he is going to use to do some stuff, and it's all these things he's stolen from the people he's been traveling with, and it's been so subtle this whole time, and he just has like a little like inventory of things, and I really 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 liked that, and I thought that was a really nice I guess reveal.
That would work better for me if this was in third person and somebody realized like, hey, where the fuck did you get that? And he was like, oh yeah, I stole it from this. And they were like, and if clues had been laid where it described Jen being close to certain things throughout the book, and you went back and went, like the perfect example is the scene where he steals the MacGuffin off of the Magus's neck. You immediately go, okay, he stole the MacGuffin off of the Magus's neck. But if it had been in third person, from like with all those little things, and you saw the moments that he could steal this stuff, but it didn't describe it as such, but then at the end, like, Sophos is like, where the fuck did you get that knife? And he's like, oh yeah, I bummed it off like, that for me would have worked. But because it's just Jen going, I'm not gonna tell you, there's no subtlety. That's just lying to the reader. There's no subtlety. It's a lie, Katie. It's a lie. It wasn't told to you, so it's not subtle.
I will say, reading this a second time, you do pick up a lot of little small hints that are like very fun to read.
There's so many hints.
Well, there's larger ones and there's smaller ones, and you're like, oh, this is what he's omitting. But it was like, I do get how the first time you might be like, I know something's up. Tell me what's up already.
Also, it doesn't read like, wait, is it supposed to, since it's in first person, is this supposedly the story he writes down that the queen requests him to like record? Because if so, that it didn't really read like that at all.
That's the vibe I got, because the last 4 pieces of dialogue were written in italics as if this was a conversation they were having outside of the scope of the book he had written. But it also doesn't work.
If that's the case, then in a way that almost like it's not maturized to the point where it works, but there could have been something a little bit better constructed that would have been fun, that it's like, oh, I am retelling this story, but I am going to lie to the reader because I want me to have like the spotlight that I want myself to have throughout each of the events that I'm retelling.
I mean, I think the thing about it is that it's not quite diegetic, but it's almost diegetic. So if it had been diegetic, he would have been like, oh, like if it really was him talking to the queen the whole time, that would have been kind of cool. And then you would have been like, oh, okay, it makes sense why he was keeping it hidden this whole time.
Yeah,
He was just teasing
that's what
her.
I'm saying.
But the thing is, it's not quite written like that. It's written in first person, but not as though this is a thing exactly. He's like a document in the world. And so I think that kind of creates a certain amount of, it doesn't, she's a very talented writer. So the first person works, but it doesn't quite work for the conceit. And going back a little bit, I think what somebody said is, or I think Maria might have said this, is that like, yeah, Jen Jen. Jen would work much better as a character if he was in somebody else's viewpoint, because you would have started off finding him annoying, and then you would have been like, oh, there's something about when you're not in someone's viewpoint that you tend to see them more. You would have been more surprised that this secondary character had like more humanity to them and wasn't just a hanger-on of the main one. And you could have gotten through the part of like, oh, I don't like him, to the part of like, oh, I kind of like him, through somebody else's viewpoint instead of being asked to identify with him. So yeah, I mean, really, this should be like, I was gonna say Sophie. What's his name?
Sophos.
Sophos' story. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh no, not even. I was gonna say the Magus. Like, how
I like
fun
the Magus too, but
no, how fun? Yeah, how fun would that? And then the reveal of who Jen is, and the Magus realizing the soldiers towards the end recognizing him and everything. That would have been fun.
The thing is, I don't think you could have gotten away with it being the Magus if this was marketed to the audience it's marketed.
Like, well, of course.
That's why I said Sophos.
And so I think from Sophos' point of view, or just a generalized third person point of view, popping back and forth between different characters would have made so much more sense. And because the thing is, I liked, because Sophos was a character where I was like, I think this guy is more important than the story is letting on. And so when his reveal happened, I was like, was right, but I wasn't like, you were lying to me the whole time as I read it, you know. So it cut back the anger quite a bit, and Jen could have, because I think Jen is a good character. I think there is some cool stuff there, but unfortunately, the way it is written, you just, the entire time you feel like you're being gaslit.
Yes.
Of an experience reading it, and then you get to the end, and you're like, God, I was like, why were you hiding? Like, just put it in third person, and then I wouldn't be angry right now, or let me know that this is what's happening, and then I get the tension of being like, oh my God, what if they find out? Or what if somebody recognizes him as they go through Edis? You know, like, ooh, tension, missing. Let's go back to plot.
Who are the other characters that they're with? They're with Paul, who is like a very quiet soldiery type, who is a very good character, who like
Pol, P-O-L.
Pol. And then there's like the two apprentices of the Magus, Alcibiades
and Biades.
And Sophos. And Sophos is like very like young and blushes a lot and is
Milk
like,
bread?
yeah, he's very chill, but he's from a rich family. And Alcibiades is not from a rich family, clearly. It's revealed over time, and he's like kind of mean, and especially to Jen, he's mean. And like, the thing about it is, all of these characters get more layers as the book goes on, and so you get more layers of them. And basically, the big so I do like how the plot progresses initially, because initially you're like, okay, Jen is getting out of prison. He's very weak. He just wants food. They keep treating him kind of like he's not a person, like he's a dog that needs to be like taken and bathed type of a thing. And he's like very indignant about the whole thing. But it's interesting because the first inn they stop at, I was like, okay. Because I don't remember a lot of the plot, especially the first half. I was like, okay, they're going to explain what they're going off to steal so we can get some stakes involved. No. No. We will not learn what they're off to steal for like literally until right before he's about to steal it. And it's weird because it doesn't, you're kind of left a little bit listless. Like, what am I reading to find out?
Yeah.
I think it was Brandon Sanderson that said like, or maybe it wasn't Brandon. It was somebody who was saying that like you always have to give the reader something to look forward to or a question to answer, and oftentimes you'll sort of overlap them, or one will be like, okay, we figured out this answer, but now we have a bigger question, and there's nothing here. You're just kind of like there's like very little forward momentum. Maria is so like, oh, she's in her element when I'm complaining about this book. But yeah, that was my main kind of like thing about it.
I think you're exactly on the nose. This is the moment that this should have happened, to give some stakes. Also talking about the potential political turmoil that another nation is going to be like invading, would have added tension, stakes to the plot, and anything to just give it, and also to unify the characters on a this is what we're doing it for this greater goal, is great, because it adds there's a point where the Biades like fucks with Jen, and the Magus is like, fuck you, don't hurt my thief. If he can't steal shit, this is all for nothing. And to know what it is and what the purpose of it is, prior to that point, like, and the stakes of it would add, like, oh, okay, and like, is he purposefully sabotaging? Because if you fully understand what's happening, then the moments when Embiodes is being a little saboteur, because we're gonna find out at the end that Embiodes is a heckin' traitor. I hate
Who
this guy.
knew?
He's
Hot take, I like Albiades. And the other thing about it is that this is another place where being from the outset, knowing Jen knows what they're going to steal and has his own motives would help, because it is a little odd that he doesn't. If you assume that he's just like trash thief, it is weird that he isn't asking what he's there to steal. Like he has no urgency in figuring out what it is. So you're just like, that's kind of odd. Whereas if he had known what they were going to go to steal, he could be like, oh, the Magus is playing it close to the chest. He probably doesn't want word getting out in case I escape. You know what I mean? Yep. Like that adds a different level of tension to it.
Or like, I don't know, like, oh, okay, so this thing is in a, like, from a planning point of view, the fact that he didn't know the situation he was walking into until the day he walked into, and like going, okay, well, what if I actually need these other things? And like, it just like, and what sucks is the Magus is such a practical person that I don't buy for a second that he would not, at least a week beforehand, start walking Jen through what he knows.
Yes.
This is the situation. What do you need? There's going to be, like, do we need to get you, like, some extra stuff? I don't know what's inside there. Nobody does, but it's bound to be wet. Like what could you think of that you might need? Like, and walking through potential plans. Like, the fact that nobody was like, wow, it's probably gonna be hard to measure stuff in there. Let's do the measuring rope thing until after the first night. Is like, the Magus should have been like, night one, you go in, you assess, you see what you can find. If you find it, great. But if you don't, at least we'll have a plan going in for day two. And none of that, and like, the Magus is a smart, intelligent,
that's a really, really good point,
practical person. So the author feels, and this feels like a novice problem, like she's trying too hard to hold on to these cool reveals.
I have a question. What do you think is the benefit? Like, what payoff do you think there is? Like, what benefits do you think there are to not elaborating on all of this? Like, for example, why would she have made the choice to keep it besides just the reveal? Like, are there any other benefits to the storytelling aspect where this is like a good choice?
You're getting any dividends from it?
Yes.
I don't think so. I think in a short story, this is a fine way of doing it.
Yeah.
But because it is like the shock of it is more pronounced in a short work. But I actually don't think she gets anything from it. I think it's an idea she was enamored with and then built the story around instead of going like, no, I need to restructure the story instead of just adding stuff to the middle. Like, I really don't think she gets any dividends from it.
I completely agree.
That's why I asked the question. It's because I'm like,
No, it's a good question, because it is you often in writing are making trade-offs between different strengths and what you're getting from one thing versus what you're getting from another. I've talked before about often I like to picture my characters as male and then female and switch them back and forth, because I'm like, okay, what do I get by doing this? Do I get like something, is it a little bit more interesting to me, or is it not? And so, there might be something she gets from revealing it later. In this case, I just don't think she gets anything. Yes. I just think it's like, no, nothing.
I think, again, it feels like a novice mistake to get really enchanted with the conceit of her own story. Which is this, I'm gonna have a Queen's thief who nobody knows is a thief and
also it gives it completely away when the literally the series name is The Queen's Thief. It's just kind of like,
yeah, but when she wrote the first book, she probably hadn't named the series, is my assumption.
Yeah.
And so, again, the problem is this feels like a first book testing out a concept. It feels like when we read The Witcher and we were like, wow, a couple of these short stories just felt like sandbox playing in the world, and it worked because it was a fucking short story. The problem with this is it feels like I'm going to explore the sandbox of this, because, like, again, world building, you can tell she spent time thinking about what this world was going to look like.
It almost feels like a writing exercise where
It
she was
does.
like,
That's
okay, I'm gonna
exactly
write,
what it
I'm gonna
feels.
get Jen's voice down. I'm gonna get, even though I don't think the Magus shows up in the second book very much. Like it actually does kind of feel like that. And to be honest, I think one of the reasons the second book has such a different tone is it was written 4 years later, and so I think maybe she just changed what she wanted the series to be like, and it was like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I already published the first one, but like, I'm actually now more interested in these world
In
building
this other
elements I
thing.
tried out in the first book.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I agree. I fully agree. Basically, the only real, they're just going along the country, basically, and they talk about olives. There's a few things. One, they stop and talk about stories from the mythology. As a nerd, the other reason I think this book works for me is A, I'm a Greek mythology nerd, and B, I actually really like world building. So I actually really kind of enjoy the world building, even if it's very telly at times, because it is relatively short as well. And so they just have to tell these like mythical stories. And like this is page time that should go somewhere else. Like it really is not needed. I mean, part of the other problem with this book is that it doesn't have a very strong thematic core. And so like none of this is really going anywhere. The gods are going to become important in this story, but not thematically or to the characters. You could basically just leave them out.
Yep.
In the second book, I was too young to really understand the themes, but there's more about the gods. But basically the big tensions are between Jen getting to know the Magus more. I remember as a kid, I thought the Magus was like kind of a bad dude, and I really appreciated that he became more likable over time. In this one, I was like, the Magus is great. He's
Yeah,
hilarious.
he's the whole time. I was
He's
like,
so
I
great.
fucking love this guy.
Well, he's also what's nice though is that you find that he's logically like there's no illogical like spurts of anger or what's the word I'm looking for? Fuck, I can't think of my
Irrational.
words today. No, it's not even that. There's nothing particularly dislikable about him. It's because he's an affable person for the most part, and you can appreciate the planning and the intelligence that he like, displays in each of the situations. Now, with that being said, Ambiades, I so no, but there's this okay, so I really thought it was so clever, or not clever. I thought it was a very good decision. When we get this point, Ambiades is kind of like huffy throughout the first leg of the travel. And then we get a scene at one point where he is interacting with Sophos. And Sophos, obviously, so far, is very, very fond of Ambiades. And it seems like he's a better guy than he seems to be acting like. And there's some interactions where even Jen, and I really liked the portrayal, it's because I'm like, oh, Jen's really thoughtful. It's because he's looking at these interactions and he's saying, maybe Ambiades is more than just a high school bully. And there's obviously some likable qualities that these people like, so maybe he's a cool dude. But then, like, that never gets developed. And that is just like thrown in the trash, and he immediately becomes pigeonholed as the high school bully, in AKA the traitor.
Yeah, it's adding a little bit of nuance to the character, but it's not adding up to something. So it's like
Yeah.
it's a good writing thing, but not structurally important in the way that like a lot of the book has problems like that.
Will's completely right. This is just getting to know the characters as they travel. As we said, the Magus is pretty cool. The next major, they go through a sea of olives, and they go through this place called the Dystopia. They tell the myths, and I'm gonna touch on that really quick because I think this is an appropriate time to touch on it. I think the myths would have worked if it mirrored something that Jen was actually going to be in the position of. Like, I thought we were going to have him having to sacrifice somebody he cared about unintentionally, a la Eugenides the god and his brother, because of like maybe he did become friends with Ambiades and it did create this thing, and they were two characters who were originally opposed, but then Ambiades betrayed him and he never wanted to kill him, but then it happened anyway. And I thought there was going to be a nice mirroring effect, because
That would have been really good.
it would have using Ambiades as the fill-in for Leopodes, which is
Man, you were so good at remembering names. I could not remember his name. I was sitting here
she's
this whole
Greek.
time, and I'm just like, what was his
Stolen
name again?
Valor. She's Greek. It doesn't count.
I also
Stolen
read the
Valor.
book and listened to the
Yeah,
the
that's
book,
true.
so that
I haven't-
helped.
Yeah.
Like, I thought Ambiades' name was Albiades for the longest time, but it's a fucking M. It's Ambiades. But anyway,
Yeah.
yes.
And if the stories had been used to mirror that and to have
That is much better.
it would have been really cool, especially because we do get a moment where Eugenides and the Queen of Adis are kind of like set up, like, you know, she's taking Hephaestia's point. Like, there are these cool, but it never comes together or like meshes into, as Will said, a concrete theme, story, narrative device.
It really is just like a writing exercise where she was writing like world building thoughts as she had them as she went, and there's no real need effort to integrate them into the story.
The moment where, and we haven't gotten to this point obviously in the plot, this is where the plot really picks up when Jen starts actually investigating the temple where the MacGuffin is supposed to be hidden and he has to retrieve it. But there's this really cool, and I think it's my favorite scene in the book when he enters a room and is that okay if I talk about this real quick?
Yeah, honestly, the thing is the first half of this book is so formless that I basically like just gave you the overarching concepts.
Okay, cool. So Jen, like, you know, looking in a temple, it's a maze. It's kind of hard, like, to find, obviously, because this MacGuffin has, like, quote unquote, never been found, and people have gone missing trying to find it. And there's this scene where he finally discovers a passageway to another place in it, and he goes and he enters a room, and it's really atmospheric, and there's a whole bunch of he thinks they're people at first, and he gets scared, and then he realizes that they're statues, and he goes up to one even and feels the fabric of something, and then slowly but surely, as he ascends or gets closer to Hephaestia, the goddess or half goddess or whatever, that's like on her throne thing, like he realizes they are gods. They are all alive, and it is so creepy that they're all at his back watching him as he's like, you know, having his moment and everything. And if she had done what you said, where the stories mirrored his own personal journey, this moment would have had even heavier weight to it when the story, the people of the stories cross together with him himself. And it could also even be foreboding for the Ambiades stuff. It's because, in some way, it's because, like, it was real. And if it's mirroring it, those themes are just like even heavier.
You're entirely correct. And it also would have given more weight to Eugenides, the god, being there and telling him to take it.
Yeah. Yes.
Knowing what we know. Like those moments. And so what I was going to say, oh God.
The next big thing that happens is that basically they get to a river. And right before that, they get told what the MacGuffin is. Basically, there's two countries, right? There's the one that they're from now. I'm blanking on the name.
There's Sunis.
Sunis. There's a small country in between. And then there's the large country that Sunis doesn't get along with called Aetolia. And like the only thing keeping those two big countries from fighting each other is the small country in between that's neutral, right? And they're going into this small country that's neutral. And what they're going to try to steal is a talisman that keeps you from dying, that used to be like the mark of royalty, like one person inherited it from the other, but then it was lost, and so the Magus wants to find it so that his king can force the queen of the country to marry him, and then they can invade Aetolia, but like for kind of like goodish reasons, and like, yeah, that's the MacGuffin.
They have to pass through Edis and get into Aetolia, so they're officially in enemy land. And then that's when they find the river. It's not the Saperkia, it's the other one, the Arrakis, whatever it was called. And basically, I'm forgetting what the name of Hamayathe's gift. That's what they're trying to get. And basically the Magus is like, oh yeah, I found the location, but I burned the documents noting where the location was. And I was like, this man is a gentleman and a scholar. There's no way on God's green earth he burns.
I know, that was pretty shocking.
He is trying to do what he thinks is best for the kingdom, and he believes that it's very important.
They get to the place, and basically you find out that the place where this MacGuffin is hidden is actually underwater in the middle of the river, under a waterfall for most of the year, but for 4 nights of the year, the water in the river is low enough that you can get into this temple thing and find the thing, but anyone who has ever come here before has it disappeared. No, like, people have known, other people have tried, but all perished, and nobody knows what happened to them. And so he's like, that's why you're here, Jen, you're gonna go in. And they're like, here's your thieves' tools. And he's like, wow, you have my thieves' tools. And
Something just occurred to me.
yeah.
Why did he have, so this whole time while this is happening, when they get there, Jen has a dream of a goddess taking down his name. What is the purpose of this? That never comes to anything.
Moira is just one of the fates that writes down human fates. That's it.
But
I don't know.
I thought it was foretelling, like, because she was, marking down the number of days he comes, and it seemed like it was foreshadowing something to happen, and then nothing happens.
like something. I mean, I thought we were gonna end this, and not only were we gonna find out that he was actually like an important person, but he was gonna end up being like a god's tool for something.
Yeah.
Like, this was also a trial. No, none of. But yeah, he keeps having dreams about this like pretty lady in ancient kind of clothing, being like, are you coming to steal stuff? And he's like, yes. And she's like, don't defend the gods. You can try. So
We should say the voice actor for this is extremely talented.
yes.
Oh
the
my
Magus'
God.
voice is great.
I
I think that's one of the
know.
reasons I liked it, is because it was just nice to listen to.
Also, it's what's his face's voice actor from Scorpio Races.
Shut up.
Oh, really?
It is. It's the same
Sean
guy.
Kendrick?
Yep. It's Sean Kendrick, baby.
Very good voice. Yeah, no, he's very good. Again, that's one of the reasons I think I found this so pleasant. He doesn't do a good female voice, but there's also basically there's like 4 lines of dialogue spoken by women in this book, so it's not too much of a trouble.
Yeah. Angry Otter does say, because Angry Otter has read the other books, Moira is in the rest of the series, and that is what happens. So he is going to become a tool of the gods. Oh, good. I wish that was at all foreshadowed here.
I guess,
Anyway.
yeah, I wish that was better foreshadowed.
Again, it's more like this is a writing exercise where she was like just trying out the idea of this god, and she was like, oh, I do like her. Well, I'll keep her in the series.
Oh, wait, Chris made a good... That's a fair point, but it also just feels weird. They said, I think that Moira, the dreams and everything, were just an acknowledgement that the gods have given their blessings for him to take the MacGuffin. Which, fair enough, that's cool. But then that kind of takes away the tension of him stealing it.
Yeah, because he's not really going against them or anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's no tension about him, because like on the third night she's like, you haven't offended anyone yet, so you gotta get it this time or else. And you're like, okay, I got it, versus like, you have kind of offended one of the gods, like, so you gotta be careful, watch out for. Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways you could use it. Anyway, he goes in, and it's this like mazy, tiny, it's not a big space, but it's got a lot of rooms, and there are like secret passages that you can get locked in, and there's also a place in the back that has a bunch of bones. And he goes in the first night, and he gets his ass handed to him almost immediately. He has to figure shit out, then he comes out, and then night 2, he's like, okay, I'm gonna take a rope, how long is this rope? And he uses the rope to measure stuff on night 2, and he's trying to find the place, and he basically comes back and he goes, I've looked everywhere. There's no hidden doors. There's no nothing. Him and the Magus are talking like, oh, did you do this? And he's like, yeah, of course I did that. And they're like, well, what about this? And he draws it out on a map, and everybody, because he asks for a piece of paper, and they're all like, like the vibe is like, oh my God, Jed, you can write? Like,
Which is funny because he then doesn't write. He just
yes,
draws.
he just draws.
So it's like that doesn't
So it
quite
wasn't,
work.
I know, that like really threw me too. Like there are all these little, again, all the little reveal moments of his true identity always seem very empty in the end. It's because like it doesn't really accomplish.
None of this book really goes anywhere. So basically, he keeps having trouble finding it. There's like, I found this vaguely interesting, but there's not really tension to it. I didn't find. Eventually, he realizes, the answer is also kind of lame. He just realizes that like, the obsidian, big piece of obsidian he thought this whole time was decorative wasn't. It was a window. And you're like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
He goes in. He has that scene that Katie said about like the gods all staring at
best
him as
scene.
statues. Eugenides, the god, is like, hey, you can take it. Yeah, good job, bro.
Which it's not stealing it then though.
yeah, and then Hephaestus like looks down at him, because Hephaestus is basically like the big god of the story by this point, and looks at him, and he's like, once I got Hephaestus, like A-okay. And then he takes it, and then he goes back, and he kind of like gets washed up somewhere, and like everybody thinks he's dead. And he also told them to move. He was like, by the way, you should move camp.
Again,
and you basically,
he is so knowing. Like he knows so much stuff.
but also the fact that he was able to look at the situation and be like, guys, you need to move camp, otherwise you're gonna get like washed
The Magus
away.
couldn't do that?
I immediately was like, oh, that's what got all of the other people, like, when they all disappeared.
Yes.
The fact that the Magus didn't look at this and go, oh, or, like, that nobody ever, like, it took Jen. Like, what does Jen know about rivers?
I know.
I don't buy it. But anyway, he saves them, they find him, he's got the gift, and like, you look upon it and you're like, oh, it is Hamayathes's gift. Like, this is it. And it's a sapphire, and it just looks like a river rock, because that's part of it. It's just supposed to be a normal river pebble, but also kind of fancy. And they were like, huzzah, we did it! And then immediately they get attacked by Aetolian guards, and Jen, like, gets really close to the, I'm telling you the way it's written in the narrative, it's like, oh yeah, I got really close to the Magus and bumped into him, and then I climbed a tree, and I'm like, oh, he stole the gift.
You know what's funny is I missed that. I think it was because like traffic. But I missed that part about the bumping into the Magus part. And when the Magus lost it, I was like, are you fucking serious? We just spent all that fucking time and he lost it. And then he just instantly afterwards like, oh, that's fine. We'll just make a replica of it. And I'm like, why couldn't you have made a replica of it to begin with?
He didn't know what it looked like. And the priestess that has to verify
Neither
it
does
knows. No. The priestess.
Yes.
They go on that whole tangent. Anyway, at the end of the battle with the Aetolians, Jen's like, oh no, Magus, your neck. And there's like no thing there. And they're like looking in the river. And like Katie says, the Magus bounced back. And he's like, nobody else knows what it looks like except for this one priestess we gotta convince. So we'll just make it look like, or the priest will just make it look like that. We're back in business,
Which
baby.
is pretty smart. Honestly,
Yeah.
and I really like how the Magus problem solves. Again, don't understand how he didn't figure out the river thing.
Or a lot of stuff prior to this, but like the Magus is just a practical, chill dude.
He's
really
also
like
at the
him.
point where now he likes Jen, and he's like, I'll still give you like your accolades for finding it and whatnot, like good work, team. I'm not going to be selfish about it. And you're like, oh, he really is a good dude. And so basically, the next part of this is that at this point, Jen now sort of has the favor of Eugenides, so like he has to steal horses at one point, and he's like, "Oh shit, I'm gonna have to cross this courtyard, and it's gonna be very loud." But it wasn't, and he's like, "Oh god,"
Which was kind of fun a little bit, but like it didn't feel.
I was
warranted.
like, it's Hamayathes's gift. He's got the god.
Yeah, the thing is, like, it makes his life easier, and it doesn't go anywhere thematically, so it's kind of like not a great writing device. And so basically, they skedaddle for a while, and then they're gonna get ridden down by some Aetolian guards.
And Jen's like, I'm leaving. I'm not going back with you as soon as I'm doing my own thing. And the Magus is like, selfish in the end, aren't we, Jen? And he's like, fuck you. And he departs, and they give him a sword. And then there's a big clash of stuff, and then Jen has to do sword fighting. And the whole time,
No. It's a little dumber than that. And I like this book, but it's a little dumber because Jen is like, give me a sword and I'll hold them off. And I'm like, why the fuck are you going to do? What are you doing? Like, why would you do that? And like, they're all just like, no, you're not. And I'm like, I'm with you. And then he actually does. It feels weirdly like flat for what's supposed to kind of be like a heroic sacrifice. And later you figure out that like, oh, he kind of did think he could get away. And like, I was like, I would have liked to see that in the moment that like, oh, I'm not going to, cost my life doing this.
One of the big like boo-boos that we've talked about many times on our podcast happens in this moment, where we get a fade to black before the action happens, and then we get Jen in a cell, like, or not in a cell, he's in a wagon or whatever. But the point is we get a jump in time, and then we're told what happened after the jump in time, but not in real time, so there's no real pull to it.
So I'm going to make an argument that this section of the book, from a writing standpoint, is a little, the jumps, because there's a lot of jumps. Like, we spent so much time rolling through stuff, going through the travel, doing the things, and then all of a sudden this last third, or last fourth, is very choppy. We keep jumping, and then we have to go back. Like, there was a point I'm going to describe, and I listened to it 4 times to figure out what the fuck happened? And what it is Jen talks about how he fought some guys, and then he goes, and there's a ton of people around him, and then it cuts. And then Jen wakes up, and you're like, are you in a cell? Are you in a thing? And then the Magus and Sophos are there, and I'm like, are they captured? Are they not captured? And they're like, oh, Jen, you're alive. And Jen's like, leave me be. And I'm like, did you guys get into a bigger fight? Like, there's no reason for Jen to be having the reaction he's currently having to them. And then there's also a thing where he was like, yeah, Ambiotes told them they were about their mountain trail. And I'm like, hold the what? Ambiotes told who? And the book gives you this line. It gives you this line as if you're supposed to understand what's happening. That Ambiotes told them about something. And I'm like, when the fuck did that happen? And then 5 pages later, explains what it means. I kept thinking, I re-listened to the half the chapter before this twice, thinking that I fucking missed something. It was written so weirdly. Anyway, what happened was Ambiotes was actually a hacking traitor the whole time, and he had told, once they got the Hemaeathes's gift, he had told the Aetolians what way they'd be going back up so that the Aetolians could ambush them, except what the Aetolians didn't know was they lost Hemaeathes's gift. Oh, to knows. But then Ambiotes, when they found out he was a traitor, Pol shoved him off a cliff. And then Pol ended up going down the cliff with some Aetolian soldiers. So sad, because I liked Pol as a character. We haven't talked about him at all. But
yeah, he's a very good character. His kind of unthawing with Jen is nice. But the thing is, this is kind of the thing is like, this is a very cool way for Pol to die. And it's like, okay, it carries some impact, but it's kind of... but and also it doesn't it
tells you
and again it's sort of just like, okay, but why, like, what does this really add? Why couldn't we keep him around as a character? What does this mean thematically? Like, what is this in all the ways that
less
like
characters to have to control,
heroic sacrifices can be effective? This isn't quite that. It just has the shape of that,
but it also doesn't feel like a sacrifice. He shoves Ambiotes, and then and Aetolian soldiers come out of nowhere because it was just them talking, and then they fall off the cliff with him. Was he in a scuffle? Was he protecting Sophos? And then him and the Aetolian soldiers fall off the cliff. Because the way it is written is this: he shoved Ambiotes off the cliff, and then followed after with 2 Aetolian soldiers. And I'm like, did the Aetolian soldiers kamikaze themselves off of the cliff to kill one dude? Like, what and it just
It's a very confusing sequence. I also had to rewind and re-listen to it a couple of times because even the writing on a sentence level is confusing. Like, the explanations are hard to follow for what exactly was happening. And it feels like a lot of buildup, especially with Pol and like especially with Pol and Jen, like as Will said, the unthawing and everything in the buildup, it never comes to any fruition. So again, these climaxes are falling flat because there wasn't like there's no.
The top of the water is really cool looking, but there's no currents beneath.
The Magus gets the Queen of Aetolia because Jen got stabbed. I forgot to mention this. Jen did a heroic dueling with a bunch of people and was actually so good. Everybody was so surprised. Oh my god.
Such a badass.
Unsuspecting excellence. Even though he hasn't touched a sword in 2 years. It's like we don't lose skills. But anyway, he does a thing. He accidentally kills a guy, which he doesn't like, and he gets stabbed. Like, sword goes into his back and out, like, near his armpit. So, like,
that's a pretty fun stab description.
Motherfucker should be dead, but he isn't. He's got a fever, and then the Magus tries to plead with the Queen of Aetolia to take him on as Queen's thief. That's apparently a role in this world. Is you have the King and Queen's thief, and the Queen of Aetolia is like, "You're going to be mine," and he's like, "Over my dead fucking body," and he's also kind of like being a bit of a baby. At this point, like, he's like, me. And then he's like, fuck it. We're going to bust out of here.
Wait. No. This is an important part of Will lore, okay?
Okay.
Oh.
The Queen of Aetolia is hot and she's bitchy.
Oh my god, I knew you were going to say it.
As a wee boy, I was like, I didn't fully understand it. I was like, she's really interesting. I'd like to read more about her. Like, she's my favorite part of this book. I don't know what it is. And that is very much the vibe from what I understand of the later books too. But I was like, it started young, guys. It started young.
I fully believe that. Seminal moment. Yeah, he's like, fuck it, I'm breaking the Magus and Sophos out, we're getting out of here. So he does, and they're like, no, you can stay, you get to be a thief, you'll be fine, don't worry about us. And he was like, nah guys, one for all for one, motherfuckers. And so they go and they're trying to escape, and they're supposed to be following the river back to in this specific direction so they can get out of there. But the next morning, the Magus is like, oh no, I led us in the wrong direction. We're actually going the opposite direction of where we should go. And then Jen is like, oh, well, they're probably looking for us in that direction that we came from, so this is not too bad.
But that doesn't matter anyway. It's because they still come after them, so that logic doesn't even fall, that wasn't even like an advantage.
So they end up going up this other way, and then Jen's like, oh wow, look, there's this like convenient log bridge to get across this raging river that we wouldn't otherwise be able to swim across. Let's shimmy across. And they get across to the other side, and then they run, and then they get to a bunch of guards and a gate, and you're like, oh, this must be the gate back into Edis. But the Etolians are behind them, and the Magus hears footprints, and they bust through. They're tattered, they're ragged, and the guards there are like, welcome to Edis, we'll take care of this. And so like they get them on horses and they shove them elsewhere, and then they go to the castle of Edis, and they go in, and the queen is just sitting there gabbing, playing some cards with some girls, and she gets up and
she has a broken nose.
She has a broken nose.
I'm assuming like a badass.
I did like the description of her, which is that like she's just not very pretty, and she doesn't have like a very feminine figure, but she's very likable still. It's in little moments like that you're like, oh, this author like can add
really
life
good.
to people.
Yeah. I liked her immediately. Like, I was off the bat. I was like, I like that she's playing cards with her homegirls. She's chilling, and she gets up, and she turns imperiously, and she looks upon them, and then she's like, oh, Eugenides, you're back. And you're like, here it is. Surprise! He's the queen's thief of Edis, depending on old or current, which pronunciation you're doing. Both are used. And he's not just the queen's thief, but he's the queen's cousin, and his father is the leader of
Chancellor of War.
And that's why, because the entire time he was talking about how his dad wanted him to be a soldier, and people underestimated how much his dad wanted him to be a soldier, and and his mother was not the queen's thief because his grandfather was the queen's thief. His mother died because she'd been dancing on a roof and she slipped off.
Which is a dumbass reason to die. I'm sorry, that was kind of wild.
What a wild...
Women be doing dumb shit when they're drunk. Yeah. And so you're like, oh my God. And the Magus is like, yeah, I kind of guessed by this point. I did like Eugenides being like, I wanted him to be surprised, but he wasn't.
Yeah, but I'll have to settle for Sophos.
But you know what? It's really frustrating though, right? It's because that was supposed to be the payoff of the secret the whole time, is the reaction or the shock of the truth. However, you knew the truth the whole time, really, with all of the things that were being like laid down throughout the plot. So it's not a surprise to you, the reader. And then it's not a surprise to the Magus. So there's no satisfaction to be had in the reveal.
Except from Sophos. I do want to highlight something, because I didn't specify it, but it is true. Angry Otter makes the point that he survives the stabbing because of the Hamayathesis gift. It makes you immortal. And Jen does describe the sensation of not being allowed to die, despite the fact that he has been mortally wounded. So that is something that is happening.
But yeah, it's one of these things where you're like, okay. The thing is, I remember as a child, I don't think I guessed it. And I think as a child, you just aren't going to guess it going in, really.
That's fair.
I read this, and as a child, I mean like 15. Like, I was not old at all. And so, like, as a child, I was like, oh, this is... Again, I liked all the characters. I liked the world. I thought the reveal was clever. But as an adult, you're a bit like, well... Everything in this book doesn't quite hit as hard. It pulls all its punches at the last minute, or more like you get punched and you realize there wasn't that much force behind it as you thought.
What the author does is she denies any conflict or tension that this secret should have had. So like the Magus is not upset immediately. It's just like when he pulls out Hamayathesis' gift, the Magus like, you Viper. Look at you! You pulled a fast one, didn't you? Like, there's no moment of the Magus being like, oh my God, you let me think this thing happened. Like, and because because you don't know, like, because the book isn't honest about it from the start and is like, Jen is going to have to betray them, you lose that tension. You lose the tension from the actual fallout. Things just wrap up really, really so nicely. I'll show you how nicely they wrap up. The Magus and the Queen and the Counselor of War, buddy. The Magus is telling them the whole story. Wow, you should have seen Jen dueling, and then he was
Jen's
like,
so cool. Jen's great.
and the guy's like, yeah, I really wanted him to become a thing. And then there was this whole point about, if we would have gotten there sooner. And he was Jen's dad is like, yeah, but he's fucking terrible on horses. And him and the Magus are like, so like everyone's broing it up. Sophos is kind of falling for the Queen, and you're like, maybe Soonest, because you also find out here that Sophos is the heir to Soonest's throne. Soonest doesn't have kids of his own. He's the nephew of the king's brother, so he's the heir, baby. And you're like, oh, because Sophos is like, wow, I like this queen. She's really cool and nice. And the Queen's like, and you're like, oh, look how nicely that could tie up. You could be allies and be friendsies or married that way. And because the Queen's like, or I think Jen's like, Soonest would never have wanted to live here, but I think Sophos could be happy here. And you're like, wow.
Also, as a side note, isn't it wild that they allowed the heir to the throne on this really impossible mission?
Insane. And it's not like the king is married with a pregnant wife, so at least there's some insurance. Like, they were just like, the only heir to the throne, fuck off, go on a mission that we know people die. Nobody else has ever come back from or been found. We're gonna send the heir.
That makes no sense.
It's Angry Otter has mentioned it. We've mentioned it. It feels like an amateur exercise. Like, what would happen if you took the heir to the throne, the king's Magus / advisor, a thief, and a soldier, and they like went on an adventure? Like that's the vibe.
It has also the vibe of like Jen telling this story to us in another book, being like, this and this happened, and the king's heir there was there, and the character's gonna be like, what? How was he there? And Jen's gonna be like, oh, I don't have time to tell you. I'll tell you another day. But like in the moment, it actually really doesn't make any sense, and she never comes up with a compelling reason for him to have been there, or for Pole to have killed himself for no reason. It's not like he did it defending him. It's very weird.
We don't actually know what happened to Pole. It just says he shoved Ambiades, and then he followed with 2 Aetolian soldiers. Did he die fighting?
And then the book ends basically with the Magus and Sophos going back home and so I guess that the growth is that the Queen offers the necklace to Jen so that he won't die, and he goes, no, I've stayed alive one time when I should have died, and I never want to do that again. And you would think that would be like a character moment, but like it isn't, because there's just no build up to it. It's like it's not like he feared death this whole time. It's not like he wanted it. It's not like he wanted fame, or you know what I mean? Like it's nothing. So theoretically, this would be like a climactic choice that clarifies and crystallizes the themes of the book into a concrete moment, but that's not really what happens. So he's just kind of like him and his hot cousin like gab for a little bit, and then he's like, you should say thank you to me, and she's like, do I have to? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, thank you, my thief. And he's like, you're welcome, my king, my queen.
In this around the same moment, Eugenides also thinks to himself, fame's not that important to me. Why not? Why? Where did that happen? He's literally, up until this point, he's been like, I need the fame. That's my driving action to like fulfill all this, is I need my name to be out there.
He hasn't told that to other people. Because again, you could make the argument that he was telling that to other people to justify why he blurted out or that he was the best thief in the wine shop. But it was internal. So like, why are we thinking that? Now, Angry Otter does make the point, agree the king wants his son to be heir, so he's actively Soonest wants his son to, but that also doesn't make sense because you don't have a wife yet or a queen, so like it puts your position at risk, because if Sophos dies and there is no heir, that means the Duke, Sophos's father, it would be the next blood relative, which would make him the like, and then suddenly you're embroiled in war because the king can be killed because he has no relatives, and then anyone else can take the throne.
And also, this should just be explained by the Magus at some point if it's relevant. Like that's the other thing is like if this is a thing, we don't have enough political background on Sunnis to know whatsoever. So, and that's the book. And that's the book. There's a part where this book very much stuck with me. It was like one of my more formative books when I was young. There's a part where he talks about like now everybody at court respects him more because he stabbed a person. And everybody's like, oh, you are like your father. And that really annoys him. And I remember as a child always remembering that as a lesson. Like, yeah, it is kind of funny that people really do value being like a man and violence more than they say they are. And so like I'm very happy that I read it when I was a child. I really enjoyed reading it this time. It was a pleasant way to spend like 4 hours. I actually almost like the first part of the book more than the second part because it's more just vibes. But yeah, I do think it's a deeply flawed book, and I get why people don't like it.
Again, I don't think this is a bad book. If you watch this video, and I'm sure Angry Otter is at some point gonna see me rant about it in the beginning, and Shay did as well, you're gonna get the vibe that I think this is a bad book, and I don't. Like, I think this writer is talented. I'm actually interested to see what the rest of the series is like, and look into that. It just happened to hit a couple of my specific no points that I don't fucks with. And also the biggest crime was it just bored me a lot in the first half, and I don't listen to things at double speed. I did towards the end, but like the first 2 hours of this book was painful. The third hour was painful, but then started getting interesting, and then the fourth hour I was like, okay. But I was also mad because I knew that was what was going to happen. I was like, we're just going to shove everything into the last fourth, aren't we? And I hate that. It's one of the complaints we had in it's funny because it mirrors the problem of A Court of Thorn and Roses, ACOTAR, where the first 3/4 is just waffling conversations, getting to know this small cast of characters, and eating dinner and describing meals, and then all of a sudden all the action happens in the last, and you're like, why didn't you spread that out? Why didn't you just take some of that sprinkle? So yeah.
But you know what's nice is that the writing is so easy on the ears, at least as far as because I listened to the audiobook, and I suppose equally easy on the eyes. But it's such a joy to listen to her narrative, her tone and everything, and the way she just everything just flows really well.
I think that's one of the reasons I also enjoyed it is because the craft of the writing I just appreciate.
It's so clean.
When I was listening to it, I wasn't necessarily upset, but every time I had to stop and then tell myself I had to start listening, it was like a fight.
That was what my problem was. Once I was in it,
I'd listen for 15 minutes and I'd be like, okay, but then I'd stop and I'd be like, there is nothing to look forward to. There is no driving force. I could stop now and never pick it up again and never be like, oh, I wonder what happened. And that's the biggest problem. That's the biggest flaw.
No, I'm with you on that. Do we want to read the second one? I read the second one, and it's very different in tone, and it is just very differently written in a different story. I was going to for sure reread it, and I probably will reread some of it at some point.
No, I think we should read it in general because it would be a very good exercise in comparing the difference in the choices she makes between the two.
Next time the channel needs a dip in views, we can pick it.
Absolutely.
It will do so poorly. You guys don't even understand.
This one is going to do
the
poorly.
video you guys just put out is skyrocketing more than usual, or it has been anyway, so it's fine.
Okay. All right. Sign us up, Maria.
Thanks for being here. See you next time. Bye.